In a previous discussion, we were talking about the idea of living in the light, of being in the light. And we looked at quotes from a number of ancient documents. And those documents suggest that a person who is in the light, of course, sees what's going on. This person is not trapped in Plato's Cave, as we discussed, but this person is aware of what's going on in the world, doesn't see things perfectly, right, but basically is aware of what's going on, is certainly working to be aware of what's going on, is active in life. In other words, life isn't just happening to this person, but this person is active in life. This person is committed to truth. This person is a person of integrity, that is, of honor, of truthfulness, of justice. This person is responsible. This person knows what's going on, not perfectly, because perfection is extremely rare in this world, but this person is working hard to understand what's going on in life. Now there's a counterexample that reminds me of Plato's Cave, and I was reading a memoir of a woman who grew up in Vietnam, and she describes a population that was so ill-informed that later some people would say that they were like frogs sitting at the bottom of a well and believing that the patch of sky they saw out of that well was the whole universe. So these are people, as the writer says, who were very ill-informed. It doesn't mean they were bad people. It just means that in that context, they didn't know what was going on. Well, that's clearly not the world that we want to live in. We don't want to live in that kind of world in our minds. We don't want to live in that kind of world in our souls. We want to be informed, we want to be plugged in, we want to be knowledgeable, right? And we want to be educated. And when I use that word education, I'm thinking of it more in the way Spanish speakers think of it when they use that word education. So I have it there in Spanish, una persona bien educada. A person who is well educated in the Spanish sense, of course, has intellectual knowledge, has academic knowledge, but also the person's character has been well shaped. And so that conception of education as being very broad, not just about academic knowledge, but also the shaping of the person. And so we want to be well-informed people, and we want to have well-formed characters, right? And to the extent we can, we want to know what's going on. We don't want to be trapped in Plato's Cave, and we don't want to be like these people, stuck, to use this illustration, sort of stuck in a well and not really knowing what's going on. Well, I think one of the great teachers that we have when these kinds of questions comes up is Aristotle. And a famous idea of Aristotle's is that, when it comes to action, there are extremes, and then there is, getting it right. And so, you need to do something. And as Aristotle says, there are a lot of ways to go wrong when it comes to moral decisions, when it comes to ethical decisions, when it comes to responding to things that come up in life. There are a lot of ways to go wrong. There are fewer ways to go right. Now, in a previous discussion, we talked about anger, right? And then other words related to it. So annoyance, irritation, fury, rage, vexation, being upset, etc. And so let's look at an example. Let's take this idea of Aristotle's of what's called the golden mean, right? Finding that right spot in between extremes when it comes to acting, to responding to something in life. And so we have the state of being annoyed. There's another state of being enraged. And then there's the state of being passive. And so let's see how this works out. So here's a scenario. A fellow student you're relying on to finish a group project is 15 minutes late yet again. And so what's the right response? Now, of course, there's a lot of information we don't have. It could be that the right response is being enraged. It could be that the right response is being passive. But it seems that probably the right response here is to be annoyed or something like that. Indicating to the person, look, you're not allowed to, we had an agreement that we would meet at this time. You're not allowed to kind of take advantage of me and to trample on my time in this way. And so maybe that involves being annoyed. I think everyone would understand being annoyed in that situation. It's hard to imagine being enraged as the right response. At the same time, it's hard to imagine just a sort of a passive response being right, because that seems to indicate, well, it's okay with me if people don't keep their word, if they trample on my time, something like that. Anyway, you can think about this on your own, but it seems to me in this scenario, of those three options, it seems to me that that being annoyed is closest to the right response. Let's look at this one. We've discussed this before. Antigone believes that an order from King Creon prohibiting burial rites over the body of Polynices breaches the law of Zeus. And so Antigone feels that she has to respond. And so then, what's the response we find from Antigone? Antigone does respond. She responds strongly. My own view is that, she could have been a little more diplomatic in her response. She maybe could have come at things a little less directly, right? And so, as we discussed in that discussion about Antigone, if we were Antigone's, life coach, we would maybe encourage her to come at things a little, less directly or something like that. But it seems that the response Antigone, had, and the stand that she took, it seems pretty close to courage. Certainly it took courage on her part to take that stand. Perhaps some people would argue that it was reckless on her part, that a certain lack of diplomacy was reckless, and maybe you could make that argument. And I'm not sure I would put Antigone right in the middle. I think maybe I would push her a little bit over toward the right, certainly not toward the left. For Antigone to feel that the law of Zeus was being breached, to feel that she should say something, and then not to say something, well, that looks like that's heading in the direction of cowardice. So although I wouldn't, maybe say that Antigone responded that she nailed it absolutely and got things perfect, of these three options here, I think she certainly showed courage. Let's look at another. Socrates is told that he must stop questioning others, that he must stop being the philosophical gadfly of Athens. Now remember that Socrates, spoke with certainty that he had a mission. We discussed that topic of telos, right? That Socrates had a mission. He knew why he existed. And his mission was to go around and question people and to find out if they were wise, and to challenge them to think about their lives, etc. And so Socrates is told he has to give up his life mission. And so we have these options here: weakness, resolution, bullheadedness. I mean, on the one hand, Socrates could have just been, just flat out stubborn and bullheaded and unwilling to listen to what anyone said. And, perhaps we could describe Socrates that way a little bit, right? I don't think anybody would accuse him going to the other side. I don't think anyone would accuse him of weakness, right? Certainly, I don't think we'd accuse Socrates of weakness. In the middle there is resolution. So to be a person of resolve, right? To act with resolution, you believe that you know what you should do, and then you act with resolution, right? Now, some people, of course, may look at that and call it bullheadedness, right? And so the question is, whether it really is or not. And, life is complicated, and people will have different interpretations, right? And perhaps some people would interpret Socrates when he refuses to stop teaching. They would interpret that as bullheadedness. I see it more as resolution, certainly not weakness. But as we look at these, we get a sense of what Aristotle's saying, that something arises, some sort of decision arises, some sort of response is called for, And what we want to do is get the response right. We want to get the response right. But that's difficult, right? There are a lot of ways to go wrong. It's harder to go right. And this is a key theme of Aristotle's book on ethics. Actually, he had two books on ethics, but the better known is called the Nicomachean Ethics, and that's where this comes from. Let's look at a case, at another case. Let's go from the land of classical Athens to the land of Oz, and we've referred to the Cowardly Lion before. Let's watch this scene from The Wizard of Oz, and I think what we're going to see is the lion going from one extreme to another, right? And we have that phrase in English. People say, "Oh, you've gone from one extreme to another." I think we're going to see that here with the Cowardly Lion. The lion, when these strangers come onto his territory, he reacts one way, and then something happens, and then he completely goes to a different extreme. Let's see how that goes.
Lions and tigers and bears.
Oh my!
Lions and tigers and bears.
Oh my!
Lions and tigers and bears.
Oh my!
Put 'em up! Put 'em up! Which one of you first? I'll fight you both together if you want. I'll fight you with one paw tied behind my back. I'll fight you standing on one foot. I'll fight you with my eyes closed. Oh, pulling an axe on me, eh? Sneaking up on me, eh? Why?
Here. Go away and let us alone.
Oh, scared, huh? Afraid, huh? How long can you stay fresh in that can? Come on, get up and fight, you shivering junkyard. Put your hands up, you lopsided bag of hay.
Now that's getting personal, Lion.
Yes, get up and teach him a lesson.
Well, what's wrong with you teaching them?
Well, I hardly know him.
Well, I'll get you anyway, Pee-wee.
Shame on you!
What did you do that for? I didn't buy them.
No, but you tried to. It's bad enough picking on a straw man, but when you go around picking on poor little dogs.
Well, you didn't have to go and hit me, did you? Is my nose bleeding?
Well, of course not. My goodness, what a fuss you're making. Well, naturally, when you go around picking on things weaker than you are, why, you're nothing but a great big coward.
You're right. I am a coward.
Okay, so if you are a lion and the king of the forest, then you would want to have some backbone, you would want to have some pluck, and when strangers come into your territory, you'd want to have a sense of dignity, right, as you checked them out, right? Who are these strangers coming into my territory? But what we see with the lion first is that he comes across as bullying and tyrannical, as he's threatening the Tin Man, he's threatening the Scarecrow, he's threatening Dorothy's dog, right? And then Dorothy slaps him on the nose. And then we see the lion go to this other extreme. Now he becomes weepy, he becomes weak, now he looks like a scaredy cat. And what's pretty clear is that the lion goes from one extreme to another. So when I think about Antigone, I wouldn't say that she, got things perfect, but I would say that looking at the three options we have here, cowardice, courage, recklessness, I would put her pretty close to the middle, maybe leaning a bit to the right there, but I would put her pretty close to the middle. When it comes to Socrates, of course, in his own day, I'm sure a lot of people saw Socrates as bullheaded, right? And I would, maybe agree with that a little bit. So maybe, as with Antigone, I'd put him a little to the, right of center there. Certainly, we would not call him weak, but I think Socrates, comes pretty close to getting it right. The poor cowardly lion, I don't think so. I think the cowardly lion goes from one extreme to another, and so he has some work to do. Here are some of the virtues that we can discuss, and Aristotle goes through a bunch of these, and we won't go through all of them. Let's just look at a few. So the top one, we've noticed that there's courage, and then one extreme on the left would be cowardice, and the other extreme on the right would be rashness, right? Courage seems usually to involve some thought, right? Antigone puts some thought into what she does. Socrates puts some thought into what he does. Rashness seems not to imply thought. A few down, friendliness. To be basically friendly. Some people are more extroverted than others. Some people are more introverted than others. Some people are more naturally friendly than others. But basically, a basic disposition of friendliness. There's that person who's always ready to fight, that person who's always ready to read things in the worst possible way, that person who's always ready to debate, so that would be the extreme of combativeness. On the other side, there's a person who kind of goes way out of his way. She goes way out of her way to try to make friends with people. Flattery, there's another word, obsequious, right? To be an obsequious person, I don't know, it's a really hard word to define, but you're working really hard to win over other people. Let's go down a few. Patience. So patience is a good virtue, a person of patience. On the right side, we don't want to be apathetic. In other words, allow people to run over us, right? On the other side, we don't want to be excessively irritable, right? Easily irritated. We want to be patient. There's that middle ground. The next one, or the next from the last, transparency. We like people who are basically honest. We like people who, are not deceptive. We like people who say what they mean and mean what they say, all right? A deficiency on the left there would be shadiness, people who we can't really trust what they say, right? Or it seems like they're always hiding something. The other extreme on the right here would be TMI, right? Too much information. The person who's too honest. When I asked you how you were doing today, I didn't actually expect to get a speech on all of the troubles you've had in the past week, etc. And part of this is about learning, the rules of the culture, learning social rules, etc. But you can go through these and you can look at these pages in Aristotle where he talks about these different virtues. And the basic idea, though, is that in life stuff comes at us all the time. All the time stuff's coming at us that requires a certain response. And Aristotle, makes the observation that it's really hard to get these responses right. And it's really, really, really hard to get them right all of the time. Right? But that's the goal, to get these responses right all of the time. Right? Understanding perfection is probably not possible, but the better job we do at getting these responses right, then the better life goes, recognizing at the same time that people will have different interpretations, right? And so what looks like courage in the eyes of one person might look like bullheadedness in another person's eyes, and that's just, one of the facts of the human condition, right? Well, Aristotle does say that people who do a good job of this kind of work, right, of learning how to respond well to these things, of practicing responses, right, the person who does a really good job at this, then is a candidate for what he calls eudaimonia. And eu is a prefix at the beginning of a word, which means good. And daimon, you can see daimon looks like our word demon, which is negative, but for the Greeks it just meant spirit. And so eudaimonia, often translated as happiness, I think a good way to think of it is good-spiritedness, and this is a condition of soul. Right? Eudaimonia is a condition of soul. It's not something you pick up while visiting Disneyland, right? It's a condition of soul. You bring it with you to Disneyland because that's the condition of your soul. Contentedness of soul, happiness of soul. So it's not fun, it's not amusement, right? It's a deeper thing than that. And Aristotle says that a moral person, or I'm sorry, in this case, this is Plato. This comes from Plato's Republic. A moral person is happy, right? A person who gets these kinds of things right, often, usually, this kind of person is happy, whereas an immoral person is unhappy. And one of the things we should conclude as we think about this is that happiness, in the sense that Aristotle and Plato are talking about it, this is the result of hard work, right? This is the result of hard work. It's not the result of just kicking back and doing nothing. It's not the result of being entertained. This is the result of hard work. Hard work, the kind of work they're describing, that kind of hard work pays off, they say, in happiness. Pays off in eudaimonia, a sense of contentedness of soul.